Hello everyone and welcome to this video. Now you may recognize this boat behind me here. It is the vessel that I developed when I was speculating what the sailing update might look like. Well, the sailing update's out now, and what we're going to do in this video is take this boat and make it into a fully working sailing boat. So as you could see, this is actually using the fishing nets, and it doesn't have an engine, doesn't have anything other than the basic kind of shape. So let's see what it takes to make a boat into a sailing boat now here in Stormworks. Looking at it in the workbench, before any changes even, obviously the fishing nets have to go. That's the first thing we can do. And because of that, the developer's sort of sailboat preset here, there's some good ideas and things that we can implement here, but first and foremost, I just want to see how unstable it is without, now if I add a keel to the underside, as such, now I'm not sure if there's a difference in which direction you point it, but I'm going to presume with a keel, it's going to be much more stable. Now, I could see it kind of dancing over there. Not quite sure why this is happening. But anyway, seems that having a keel does make it stable, albeit somewhat glitched. Whenever I get phantom physics like that, my first instinct is add weight. And for me, if it does something weird like this, it tends to be usually because the bodies are not weighted properly. No, we're still dancing. The second thing that comes to mind is an issue with the bodies. So we can even remove these rotational pivots and see what happens if we make the vessel one single body. Okay, well, it seems to now stabilized. Alright, so we are stable with one single body as the sailing boat. Obviously we can't have that, and we have to make some changes, including adding, of course, the pivots, but we're going to take our time with that. Now previously I had small pivots. Granted, we have all this space to us, so we can use larger ones. Of course, this forward jib sail does have to get moved back a little bit, but that's fine. So with it like this, if I drag it back by one, and we'll see how tall we want to make them. That's something up for sort of the learning lessons, I suppose. Alright, we'll place that one on, and then we're going to do the same with the mainsail. And once everything is attached to its pivots, we're just going to see how it functions. Now, this is a full video of me building this, so I'm not trying to skip any steps. Alright, it's back to dancing around. Maybe adding a sail will fix that. I'm not quite sure. I've never built a sailboat before, and I'm imagining this is also many of you in many cases here. Interesting enough, on the internet, I actually see a lot of sailing boats do not have this forward one at all, but rather what you'd have is something that looks like the jib sail, let's say attached from a point here, here, and up there, causing a triangle like this that can, in essence, move. And then as you position, and actually it wouldn't be here, minor correction, it would be attached to something along this line or this boom. So it would almost be like this, and then attached, fixed to a point on the vessel. Actually, I think that it looks more like if we had the sail, let's call it like here, here, and then of course we need two going up, so we could put one here and then one there like that, and then we can make this one on a sliding, like I think the sliding track thing is a great idea, otherwise you can never stop it from blowing around in the wind, and we definitely don't want that. But let's just do a quick and dirty plugging in of all this stuff and see what sort of spawns. I have absolutely no idea what it's going to look like, and deviating from the two, like from what the sample preset vessel shows, this might end up being disastrous. Still jumping around, even with the sails. But anyway, you can see that this type of system would be interesting because as you spin out the mainsail here, the jib sail will counter it in the opposite direction. Now, we don't really want that. Another train of thought is instead of having these large pivots like this, we'd actually have a mast that can't move. So we'd have the mast fixed in position, and rather than the mast moving around, we actually have a pivot that will spin around in the post here and spin around this stick. So in this case, that's the only thing moving. The actual mast there doesn't do the moving. And then in this case, with the exact same idea in mind, we can actually have that jib sail attached to the same thing and just working like that. With this configuration, the thing isn't shaking itself to death, so that's kind of nice. I did not attach the sails themselves. And one thing that's interesting I saw in the comments is someone said that the first one of attachment is the one that sets the color to the sails. And I'm not sure if that's 100% true. I haven't confirmed it yet, but in theory, if you'd hit this one here with the color and this one here with the color, those are the colors that this spawns in, and it doesn't seem to be the case. Anyway, that looks kind of nice. Looks very majestic, actually. No idea of the feasibility of such pivots spinning around, but I do like the idea. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is that the preset one, instead of this, it actually had sliders, and that slider is a fantastic idea, or tracked slider, or whatever you want to call it. That's a great idea to setting up the sails and pretty much pushing them in or out, in essence making them do their thing, their sailing thing. So that is a really good way to do it, and I'm gonna take that idea actually. So in essence, instead of that, we just put a track out like this, make sure there's enough head clearance here. Seems that there's more than enough. In fact, this whole thing can probably come down. I am trying to keep it attached upright instead of flipping it over like that, because then I guess that wouldn't really matter. The sail can be attached on the underside, I suppose. So it could be like this, and then that just, I mean, the only downside is I suppose the piece that comes moving out all of a sudden smacks you in the head. So it almost is nicer to have the lowest part be the one that is kind of making the moves. And I'm not sure how this glitching of the bodies is gonna, how the game will take that. That's something else we'll have to kind of determine if that's possible. I know it's possible to glitch the bodies like that and just have like this upper portion floating even though we have two pivots not doing anything, but will that cause either body issues in the game, or will it cause other problems such as just issues with electrical passing through it or whatnot? I know there's sometimes problems. The best is if it's just kind of dead or not doing anything, but when you have things passing through, we'll have to see how that works. And then let's go ahead and add the sail. So of course we're going to be extending this sail, and we're going to be extending this sail. Of course here we'll need to have some other sails, so it may be to our advantage to actually have this one be out by one and this one also be out by one, just like that. This is a learning experience, I'll tell you for sure. So we'll do something like that, and then what we can do is have this attached to that and have this attached. I mean, that one will be fixed unless I position it on this, and then this one there. Now they're both kind of spinning with it, so that will work. for that first one, and then we'll have to see for the rest of the connectors. I'm assuming that this will still all work, so we'll just attach them like this, and this one down here, do this, close the loop. Alright, now the Sailboat preset had a constant on for the sail to be extended. I'm just going to throw all my microcontrollers up here for now. So what we can also do is have the constant on expanding the sails. Is it the constant on one that gets painted? I've not quite isolated which one gets painted, though that's a problem for later. Anyway, there we have it. So now we can kind of bring in the sails and bring them out. Now, of course, I do have to attach the mechanisms to it to see that it actually works. So this is the starting point. The one thing I'm not in love with is just the look of this helm. I did add that for some sort of styling. I wish there was a sleeker version that rather than one that has kind of this big clunky thing, but using what we have, our only options are either have the display as part of it like this, and you kind of function like that, or have it as I just had it, which might look a little better. So that's the one part I'm a little unsure about. Anyway, that doesn't matter right now. What does matter is this. So we do want a battery. We don't have to put a huge one if we don't want. I mean, it's a pretty small boat. It's not going to have a ton of auxiliary things going on. So what I can do is hide the battery somewhere. For now, let's just put it centered. I still haven't really decided what the interior is going to look like, the orientation. Of course, the engine will be back here. This portion will be a cabin, so the battery will be there or somewhere in that vicinity, and then we need a relay, or a breaker actually, because I like having main breakers in my vessels. So we'll put the breaker there and just attach the battery to the live one, and then this one to everything else. This way it just prevents the things from flopping around, so that's gonna give our boat a little bit more it's not going to cause the joints to move around. So we'll call that main power. But point is, now it should at least remain fixed. It won't start moving around. How will this behave in high winds? Will it start to move? Will the sails open up? That's good. So as long as when it's very windy, if the sails aren't moving around like crazy, we can actually kind of stop. Now I might add an anchor, not decided yet, but that's a good sign. One thing I would like to add is a little bit more draft, a little lower hull design, just because right now I could see that the water is kind of lapping up against this, which is fine. I mean, if you're out in a storm, you be careful and you'll have a bilge pump for the cabin, but I think an extra layer of height for the hull might also help it be a little more stable. This is a pretty shallow hull for what is a decently sized boat. Not a huge boat, but for sure something that's not tiny either. It's not a little dinghy, so I do think that adding a little bit more here especially will be okay. Now that really didn't do anything because I just made this part taller, which was not my intention. So what I actually need to do is go down and grab this kind of deck and slide it up by one, and then what I'm going to do is just fill in the dots, pretty much connect everything else. What this gave us now, in essence, is a bigger clearance inside here, so the part that actually is watertight and that does contain the buoyancy, because adding an extra layer of just like what I first showed won't actually give us more buoyancy, because it's literally just adding more weight without adding more air-filled space, if you will. With that greater draft, you see that it is sitting up higher in the water, so that's a good sign right away. And it seems to be still balanced, of course, which is good. And now let's see how we can tackle the sails themselves. This may be to everyone's displeasure, so we'll see how this works, but an actual sailboat has a lot of cables and rigging and stuff. I'm honestly thinking, what if, this may be crazy, But what if, rather than having a simple lever or controls to move these masts and the sails, we have the handle, or the hand cranked control, or whatever you have it. So if I have these on either side, and then unfortunately there's no data node coming out of them. I really wish that we had just a torque crank that actually had data, but no, so we have to put a little generator on the end, which is fine, not the end of the world. Then of course I have to seal up anything that is exposed now, such as this. This actually may be good for giving a little bit more air in the bottom of the boat. By air I mean by air I really do mean just causing a bit of extra buoyancy, so like that. Anyway, with this now and with this now, what you'd do is, as you'd crank the left one, you'd move this to the left. As you'd crank the right one, you'd be moving it to the right. So in essence, it acts like a winch, like a fake winch. Now, this will get quite interesting because we'd also need one on the front. And if you're constantly going around making micro adjustments, I do think that is the beauty of sailing. And like I said in my last video, yes, I imagine there's going to be people that make automated sailing boats that have the wind speed measured, and then this gets adjusted based on the wind and the direction you want to head and stuff. But what I really want to do, what I really thought was cool here, is to create a vessel that was pretty analog. Like, yeah, it's gonna have tech, it's gonna have a display, it's gonna have some stuff, but it's also just gonna have kind of a manual cranking style system for the sails. So these ones would control this one left and right. And then likewise, I imagine we'd have ones up here or here that control the jib sail left and right. And then of course we'd have to be able to extend this. Another little pet peeve of mine is I wish that there was a difference when you torque this to the left and to the right. Currently, no matter if you press W or E, it always spins in the same direction. I wish that holding W and E would actually give it opposite cranking. So then we wouldn't have to have two ones of these to control the movement of this left and right. Granted, yeah, I could make it such that when you pull it the first time, it moves out, and then if you let go and stop, pull it the second time, it goes in. But that does create a little bit of a problem. Well, we'll see. It is much cleaner just having the single one rather than having two. So I might just go through with that, where the first time you pull it, it'll extend it. The second time will push it in. So if you see that it's moving in the direction you don't want it to be going, then you just let go and spin it in the other direction. Now, do I want them up here or do I want them here? I think here is less functional because they'll be popping into the room, which I don't really want. So for the jib sail, I honestly probably will position these guys here and here, and kind of see how that works. So you may be dancing around your vessel. That's all I'm going to say, is that this may not work because you may literally be required to jump through and move and adjust and stuff. But I do think that's how actual sailing works. I'm not 100% sure, I'm not a sailor, but I do think that there is a large amount of rigging. Now, maybe I don't need these there. It probably would work a little nicer rather than there if I just mount them somewhere in the front here, so we don't have to be jumping all the way over everything. Like, let's say here and here are the controls to the jib sail, and pretend there's ropes there, wires, guy lines, whatever you want to call it. I will leave that there just so it's attached. So I think this may work, and then you can position them. One thing I do want to try to do and see what it happens is, rather than having the door like that, I want to try removing this and having a little step, which might actually make the boat less susceptible to flooding. I know this isn't really related to sailing, but it is sort of semi-related, I suppose. So if I put the door in this position here, what is there? Just regular old blocks. Okay, So if it works like this, and then over here we just have a sloped piece or inclined piece like this in this direction, and then over here that kind of handrail takes up that stall, but what I can do is instead of this put a step to act kind of like our kind of walkway or a stair as such. Might be a little less susceptible to flooding, and then we might end up with the exact same idea where we just get into the boat easily enough. Putting that to the test here, open this and crawl in. Now we're inside the sailboat. I may add a subfloor to be honest, and then there's gonna have to be some stairs or something to crawl out of here. I suppose this wouldn't really work for now, but anyway, we're in here. The standard height is 7 blocks of a person, and we're at 8, which actually makes it a little unfortunate because if I put a subfloor here, I've not gained any buoyancy, whereas if I put the floor 1 block higher here, we gain ourselves a little bit of extra ground, and then down here I could either put a fuel tank or whatever else I want. So it does have that added benefit of putting the subfloor like this. Now I do have to see the practical implications of what this actually does and how this all works, specifically when it comes to when it comes to walking around, because now it's actually, our head may want to glitch and we may not even be able to walk through here. We got to test it out. We crawl in here. Oh, this is the cutoff. It seems that you do have a bit of wiggle room for standing. You can see here now we can't walk, but if we crouch and walk, then you're fine. So either we added more clearance and headroom, or I just leave it like this. One thing I'm not a huge fan of is these ladders now, and also just, I'm a tall dude. I'm 6'2", 6'3", so I'm feeling a little claustrophobic with my, and in real life, not in the game, obviously. I'm feeling a little claustrophobic here with my head so close to the ceiling. But then, of course, without the subfloor, this is too tall. So that 8 block high really is kind of the sweet spot. So I may just have to fill it with blocks and kind of see what happens. I guess on the upside, I may not need to put weight on the bottom. I could just do that, and we don't need a huge gas tank here anyways. Putting it underneath all this would be probably overkill. And if I really wanted to put it under here, I could do the helicopter approach and kind of just do this and then fill the cavity with diesel, which will go to the engine back there. Anyway, we'll forget the interior. Let's get to this. Let's do this part. These guys have to be working. This has to open up. That's the main attraction here. So I'm going to spawn up an empty microcontroller. Now keep in mind we have to do, it's going to be 2 microcontrollers used twice each for the front and back sail. So let's start with the easier one, which is just whether I want it to move left or right. So it'll be attached to the pivots there. Oh, velocity pivots, wrong pivot. So that has to actually get changed for the robotic rotational pivot. So this is what we actually need. Now, did I put the right directions? I guess we'll see. That doesn't really matter. I don't like obsessing with the directions because even when I do, they end up going the wrong direction anyway, and then I have to invert it. So let's start off with our number input and our number input. Now these are going to be our actual hand cranks. So crank left and crank right. And that's going to be the input. And the output is going to be a number output, and it's going to be the pivot. So that's how we're going to set this up. I think that's all we need. I really don't see, unless we have like a reset, but even this doesn't have a reset because the small rotational pivot, the rotational robotic pivot does not have a reset position. So quite simply, and keep in mind now, the rotational pivot works in a function of spin. So you can make it go to 90 degrees in each direction by applying 1 through negative 1. and that's going to rotate the thing. So first things first, inside my microcontroller, I'm going to want to put probably a counter, and that counter is going to count up to what we need. So we're having a maximum of 1 and a minimum of -1. We do want our clamp. We want it to start off at 0, which is fine, and we'll set the speed here. So that's the speed at which this starts to move. And it's literally just as easy as putting a threshold gate. We're not going to beat this thing to death. It's just going to have a threshold gate, this, threshold gate, this, and we'll set it to be like, I do have to see how sensitive it is. So that's kind of the key here, because if I make it like 0.1, it will keep going even when I've released it. So look at this. As I grab this and attach the RPS, when I let go, see how it drops kind of slow? Well, I want to make sure that it's not still moving. All right, we got to redo this. So output, the second I let go, it drops under 0.005. So 0.005 is our cutoff. Okay, that makes a lot more sense. Okay, so in here, 0.005 all the way up to 1. So anything less than that, we don't want it to be doing anything. All right, 10th time's the charm, because this has been causing me issues. There we go. All right, wrong direction as I knew it would be, but there we go, and it's moving way too fast. So that's something to keep in mind, but we're off to a good start. So I'm just gonna change these, and yeah, I didn't really have to name them left, right, it doesn't really matter. And then here we're just gonna increase this, add like 2 zeros, slow it right down. We don't want these to be fast motions, we want them to be nice and controlled. So in this case, it's moving, that's too slow. So there's a balance. Another adjustment, and let's see, there we go. That's a much better speed. So in this case, we can use the cranks to move the sails. I think it's moving at a pretty reasonable speed. And then we jump here and do this one to move the jib sail. So it lets us now control these. Of course, these ones are going to extend this, and you can see the other ones over there. So first, what I'll do is the easier thing, which is just literally duplicate my effort for the other cranks to move the jib sail. So that's the one in the front. All right, now that that's done, now we'd get into the more complicated one, which is literally just moving this in and out. So I don't really need anything but a single one. You just want to have your one single crank and then your slider. So those are the two things you have here, nothing else. But keep in mind now it gets a little complicated because we have to switch the signal. So the first thing is the same, it's just threshold, and the threshold gate will be applied anytime we go over that 0.005, so same as always. And then the slider. So the way these sliders work is they actually do have speeds. So versus the pivot, I was using one that actually told us the rotation. Well, now we're doing speed. So speed is different because we're going to be applying a speed under a certain circumstance and then changing that speed. So what I'll want to do, probably 2 numerical switch boxes, have them add into each other, and then what I'll do is apply the threshold to work these. Now I do have to have them intermittently changing, and how we're going to do that is with an SR latch. Just kidding. I spent 20 minutes trying to figure out why the SR latch wasn't working, only to remember how I did the transmission, and that's using an up-down counter. So the first time we crank it, it hits the pulse and it sets the counter to 1. We then are putting in this because these two, it's this one and cranking. Then the second we let go and hit it again, it jumps to number 2. And then we're spinning it in the other direction. And when we hit it a third time, it actually resets it. Now that resetting may not be what I want. It goes to 3, which is actually not great. So I think that we'll have it only going up to 2. and then we'll reset the number when we have it happening a third time. So rather than 3, what I'll want to do is have this sequence be not, and it'll be a pulse, so it only happens once. So then it'll happen once at the get-go, which is fine, and then hopefully it happens when we need it to start moving. And actually I put a little dial here to tell me what we have. So we push this, it should go to 1, and it's going forward. We let go, it stays 1. We do it a second time, goes to 2, starts moving back, we let go, 0. Again, 1, beautiful. What a nice system. So there you have it, you're expanding your sail, and then if you try to bring it back, you can bring it back, and then if you let go, it resets itself. Nice. Sometimes it's just worth testing a couple times. Anyway, took way longer than I wanted to, this one, with the SR latches, but we got there in the end. That's all that matters. So now we have a working sail sort of extension microcontroller here, and the speed isn't terrible. I kind of like the speed. It's not gonna happen too fast. Yes, if you get caught in a storm, you may have some trouble as you're trying to spin this thing while trying not to crash, but I do like the manual controls. Now again, I'm sure there's people that have joined this video expecting me to do them what do I want to call it? To do it like automatic, but there is something about having it just simple, and at least for this version, and then afterwards we can get more fancy. This is going to paint the sails, hopefully. Nice. Alright. So it's already looking like something. I think that's all we really need to get it underway. I will add the motor and other elements though. Because it is a Regalbilt boat, what I'm going to do is just extract this interior and place it over there. Since I've developed it, since it works, I don't really want to go through the struggle of developing everything or even moving microcontrollers. One thing I like to do to prevent all kinds of odd colors, I just repaint this version of the vessel, whatever I'm using, into pure, just plain white, nothing fancy. And once all the colors are removed, or hopefully most of them, such as this, then I just save it as a new file. And then in my sailboat, I will add that new version in, and just prevents kind of like weird color bleed and all kinds of stuff. So even like this, you can see I can grab this display and just drag it over, and now I don't have to worry about recoloring it and potentially changing things. And I just repaint it once in the final product when I want to. So that's kind of the advantage of this. Obviously the seat itself I will have to adjust because I'm not using a seat, so I'll have to manually drag the elements. Like this is WS, and then I just manually do this. So you'll see me back when I'm finished this. She's coming quite nicely. I've put a lot of details already, including in the interior. It doesn't seem like I've done a lot, but including spotlights and such. I do have to add somewhere one of these hoppers for fish, so we'll see where that kind of comes in, but the controls are there, the fish finder, all that good stuff. Even the interior is coming along, and the reason why is because I do need this to be done before I can place the microcontrollers, probably in this subfloor, and electricity, things like that, so it's coming. Added some design elements on the front to make it look a little sleeker, less boring, and now I pretty much have everything and ready to start throwing the microcontrollers in. So we have a nice teak deck here, that's obviously important for a sailboat, and then we're gonna move on into that interior. I cleared out the bottom subfloor. That's gonna be populated with microcontrollers, leaving this whole back area for an engine. Obviously this is way too big for an engine and we don't need a huge engine here, but I do want to leave maximum space for what is to come. Funny enough, to me this part is like Tetris, where you just have to see how well you can stack the various shaped objects and end up with something that resembles maximum filled out space. You can see here, that's all filled out. And we're gonna see how this works. I grabbed both big engines out of this boat and I'm gonna shove them into this boat with 2 propellers. Of course, if that's overkill for the sails, then I could always reduce it down to 1. I'm super excited. It seems that it works. I've turned off the engines and I'm purely relying on the wind power now, the sails, to propel me. So you can see here, we're at 6 knots. Granted, I don't have the wind very fast right now, but I've positioned the sails such that I'm able to actually turn a little bit. And the nice thing is, with all this display stuff, you can see that we actually do have a map view, we have our fish finder, so a lot of different types of things to entertain us while we're sailing around. But I think it's a beautiful boat, not huge, but nice enough to kind of take and learn the intricacies of sailing. Now again, people may say, okay, I should have made a automatic system, and maybe I do in the future, but something about having this manual mode is really satisfying, I have to say. Now these motors, they're large and powerful and actually can propel the vessel to speed it up, or you can, just rely on the wind as I am now. So you can see, moving that lets you steer a little faster to that side. So definitely a lot of little intricacies, but overall I actually really like the manual, call it hand cranked system of sailing, just because it gives it a little bit more realism and it's a little more analog. And I do have to say, I do like my mast the way it is, meaning to have kind of these pivots as I've done them like this. Oh, now we've stopped. So I really do need to learn how to sail, but the point is, you do have a motor. If you do want to not sail, you can tie up or bring in your sails. They're gonna pick up less wind in that instance, and use your motor power or use your sail power, whatever. It's a pretty nice little creation, actually. Something that kind of threw together relatively quickly. And I'll see, I might add the anchor just to kind of prevent moving off from where we're trying to go. 20 knots, pretty respectable, to be honest, for a sailboat. Not bad at all. We are going with the wind, so that's obviously helping us go even faster, but I'm quite happy. So that is this vessel. I'll be cleaning up the interior, doing a little bit more finishing touches in here, but overall the idea is there. And here she is, polished up. When we turn it on and take her for a spin, I've added my flag, which I'm really proud of, actually. I was gonna put a country, but then I'm like, you know what, it is an honor to be mentioned and have my own flag. The interior is all cleaned up. You can see that now we have a fully functioning interior, along with a little stovetop, bed, seating area, and you can cycle the lights. So if you do have sort of a nighttime scene, you can end up having really nice blue lights. And other than that, everything seems to work. I've been using it as an actual sailboat for a little bit. That seems to be working nicely, and the little details are all kind of polished up. Now, one thing that I did note is that the RPS are pretty high, so it will burn through fuel pretty quickly if you are going at top speed, but of course you can turn that down. Nothing says you have to be kicking at full speed. So if you turn down the top speed, you can, or turn down the throttle, you'll end up doing a little bit better fuel economy. Of course, this is a sailing boat meant for sailing, so if you do use it as that, that is the best thing possible. and I did add an anchor. So if you do have somewhere you want to kind of stay put, you can extend that anchor line and kind of stop yourself from moving, kind of position yourself in one location, all that good stuff. So anyway, I do want to thank you all for watching this video. I want to thank you all for supporting. Of course, I want to thank the YouTube members and the Discord server boosters, since they are additional supporters who sort of really enjoy my creations and are showing it. But if you're not, I do love the comments. I do love seeing the engagement from the community. The last video I put up with the actual sailing update did amazing, and I'm really happy for that. So hopefully this one does as well. And until next time, happy Stormworksing, everyone.